Thank you to the companies and the judges. And as I said at the beginning, farmers are a critical factor in the Agtech ecosystem. And I would like to call a very good friend of us, Mitch Presser from Freshfields, Bruckhaus, Deringer, who will moderate the panel, The Role of Farmers in Agtech Investment Development. Please, Mitch.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Mitchell Presser. I'm the head of U.S. M&A at Freshfields, the large international law firm. I've been a lawyer for about 30 years. I also spent, in about 2006, I was the co-founder of a private equity fund called Payne & Partners. We raised a $1.2 billion fund, and we invested most of that into the food and ag industry. So I've invested over $3 billion in broadly, and with over $2 billion of that being in food and ag industries. I left about 2 years ago, but I continue to stay involved in food and ag industry and invest personally, primarily in Agtech. This panel is about the role of farmers in the Agtech development and investment process. So with me, I have three people who have far more expertise than I do at this. To my left is Pat Christie. Pat's a pioneer in the development of platforms for farm management. Then I have David Gray. David is one of the early institutional investors in agriculture, and Tom Green, who is who's a real farmer. He actually runs a farm management business, one of the largest. I'm going to ask each of you to actually introduce yourselves. And then we're going to do a couple of different things, including call back a couple of the people who were just up here pitching their businesses. So,
Pat Christie, chairman, founder of Conservis. As Mitchell alluded, we were one of the early leaders in the platform side of farm management. We started in 2009, and we're one of the few that actually didn't have the idea. It was farmers who came to us and said, we need one place where data can be organized so that we can actually find efficiencies and run our farm better. And as more technologies have come to bear to the farm, there's an opportunity and a need, quite frankly. Farmers are asking us to help homogenize this data into one platform. So we're operating in 26 states in the US, Australia, and Argentina. We touch row crops at the family farm level all the way to the institutional operator, and have recently moved into orchard crops and specialty crops.
Good morning. I'm David Gray. I'm with Altima Partners in London. We are institutional investors in agriculture. We started investing in 2005 and 2006, so before it became really popular. We raised what was at the time the largest agricultural sector fund of about $700 million in 2007 and 2008, which we deployed in both listed agricultural companies and then a number of unlisted agricultural companies, primarily focusing on producers, working with those companies to scale and achieve superior performance, and then we've exited 3 of the 4 that we did.
which brings us very naturally to Tom.
Thank you. Our business is Spearhead International. We are farm operators, headquartered in the United Kingdom with farms there and in Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Romania, where in total we're farming about 85,000 hectares. That's a little over 200,000 acres, producing a wide variety of combinable crops as well as specialist potatoes and vegetables. Interestingly, the fund that David just referred to was the main institutional investor in our business back in 2008, and I was privileged to have David on the board of our business from that period until last year, when that company was sold, our company was sold successfully to Payne & Partners, who Mitchell referred to in his introductory remarks. So there's a certain amount, it's either a coincidence that I find myself sitting here, or else maybe there have been people talking behind my back.
Yeah, it's always a little bit of both. So Again, I think the panel, the panel is, having just sat through the session, is even better designed than I thought, because when you heard the questions that came after each one, it was really about ROI. And if you think about this group here, Pat's about measuring at ROI, David's about creating it, and Tom's about delivering it. So it really, it really fits well. But I want to bring back two of the presenters from before. It was Obvi and Liran. And we're going to ask them, now you actually have some people in the farming business and farm investment business in front of us. What we were asked to discuss was, what is the role of the farmer in ag tech development? So I'd like to do that. I'd like to get first Obvi and then okay, so you said you had 3 farmers who invested in your company. They actually gave you cash. Cash is a good thing. What do you look for from farmers? What would you be looking for? And why should these farmers, these people in the farming industry, invest in your business?
So I will start that we start the calibration with identified the need of the farmers. And this was the most important part at the beginning, because you have the idea what you want to develop and what the solution. But at the end of the day, you need to speak with the end user, with the farmer, to identify exactly what they need. For example, you can develop a robot that will pick 100% of the food, but then the farmer will not be able to buy this system. So the idea is to identify the need of the farmers. And then I think the best way to be part of the calibration is to put money, because when you put money, you are involved. And when you are involved, you have impact on the development and the company for the future. So,
okay. Well, we're going to bring Liran up for a similar pitch, but then at the end, we're going to come back to this a little bit like Shark Tank, maybe so. Maybe Tom will actually make an investment here, or David. But we'll come back to the Krishim and see if see what they think at the end. But Liran, if you don't mind coming up and sharing your pitch.
So similar to what Avi said, for us, getting that input from whether it's a grower or specifically for us, it's the agronomist, was the #1 priority. Bringing on board Glades Crop Care, which now works with us, essentially helps us solve our #1 rule, which says if it takes longer than 10 seconds for the user, the grower, the agronomist to figure it out, they're throwing what we have outside the truck. And having those folks on board and trying this out, and not just trying it out, but being open to providing input, meaning they actually need to invest, whether it's 10, 15, 20 minutes per day to provide that input for us, is our #1 most important thing, to get it right. I think we all know the issue with technology versus adoption in the industry, especially out in California. I know a lot of what I call them essentially zombie ag tech companies, that they come and they show incredible technology, but nobody's using because it's too damn hard to figure out. So our approach has been to come from the bottom up and start from the use cases, as opposed to come from top down and say, we're going to replace all of you and have something amazing going on.
So I think we'll come back to this, because I think the interesting question is, I think, in each of these companies, and lots of companies, great products, great things that could work on a farm, but from a farmer's perspective, why invest in it? Why don't we see if it works? We can buy it like everyone else. What's the advantage where you get 6 extra months on it? What's going to happen? So where's the advantage to the farmer to actually testing it out? What does the farmer get out of it? So Tom, I want to start with you. I mean, you must get these requests all the time. There must be 20, 30, 50 companies sitting right in this audience who would love to do something with you. You have 80,000 hectares across Europe. That's some prime farmland for them, right? That's great real estate. If they could get you to use some of that and use their products and prove it out, great value for them. How often do you get these? When you do, how do you ever do this? How often? And how do you prioritize? Because everyone walks in and you know, you can get rid of all your farm laborers now because, you know, you can use Obvi's robots and you'll have no pests anymore because of Liron. How do you prioritize? How do you pick? And what do you do?
Well, thank you, Mitchell. We are indeed in receipt of hundreds of approaches from different technology businesses all of the time, ranging right across our operations from the field operations in terms of cultivations, planting, harvesting technologies, post-harvest handling of the crops, genetics, crop protection, irrigation, fertilizing systems, precision ag in all of its different manifestations, as well as the huge new and emerging area of data software management and the systems that go there. So we, in the operating world, have a huge challenge to see the wood from the trees, to sift those opportunities and to make those selections. Primarily, you ask about prioritizing. We're looking for competitive advantage. We're looking to differentiate ourselves by adopting reliable new technologies that will transform our performance. We're looking to create shareholder value through that. We're looking to enhance our reputation with customers through the technologies that we use. We're looking for payback. So, and we are very concerned about the constraints that exist. We're concerned about the bandwidth of our management team to deal with the challenge that they're being asked to consider. We're concerned about the management capacity that we've got to deal with it, the capital that we're going to have to invest, but also we're extremely concerned about the speed with which we can deploy a technology and get the payback. I think one of our experiences has been that we've often been over-ambitious with regard to partnering with new technology businesses to find that we end up doing a huge amount of development work that actually costs us money in the process, both in terms of time and delay, before we are able to successfully deploy. I think use of common sense in that respect is extremely important. Being disciplined enough to think through this is the hypothesis that the challenge that we're trying to address here. Here's the technology that we believe delivers a route to a successful solution. And here's the timeline and the capital and the management that's going to have to be deployed in order to achieve that. Those are the kind of thought processes that we go through for forming a partnership. And then we get behind it very enthusiastically in order to achieve our aims, and very often to be extremely collaborative with our technology partner, because often we're actually developing the technologies together.
And when you're doing this, are you looking sort of individual, sort of, you know, very specific? Here's one that works on wheat in, you know, Croatia, or are you looking at things that are going to work across your entire operations? And you have an example, one or two examples, maybe one that worked, one that failed, that was a disaster.
Sure. Well, we're operating at many different levels. Lots of very modest, small technologies that are being deployed locally to achieve a particular aim. For instance, we've recently deployed a new system to remotely monitor our potato storage facilities, where we're monitoring airflows, temperature, humidity in the stores. We're also sharing the data of the movement in sugars in the potato crop across many growers and with our customers. So that's an interesting, narrow piece of technology. But probably the biggest area that we've seen over the course of recent years has been our adoption of variable rate fertilizing, which has been adopted pretty much across our business and across the industry now as a standard. And the consequence of that is that we are able to use GPS to accurately monitor our soils and the crop in order to deliver a very accurate, bespoke fertilizing program for each of our crops in every location. So as we drive across the field with the fertilizer machine, we are deploying exactly the right fertilizer for the particular area of the field. The consequence of this is that we're using less fertilizer and we're gaining more yield. So it's a double win for us. That technology, the next stage of the development of that technology will be variable rate seeding, as we will, in the future, begin to adjust our seed rates, fewer or more plants per square meter, dependent upon the soil type and the yield capacity of that particular square meter of the field. And then in due course, also, I believe, we'll be using the same technology to variably control the delivery of plant protection treatments, our use of biological and other agrochemicals. Really exciting technology. That's already transformational for us, and we can see a huge way further forward. Now, you ask what doesn't work for us. In a similar kind of way, it's very easy to get that kind of thing wrong, because we're reliant in these technologies on some very complicated communication between the software that we're using, often the cloud that enables that communication to take place, but also the mechanization. So the ability of the John Deere tractor to communicate with the horse drill that it's towing behind it is really critical. And sometimes those communication elements let us down or have not been sufficiently well developed in the telematics area. We've also recently picked up and started using, in various locations, controlled traffic farming. This is the technology that says that we will absolutely religiously ensure that all of our operations are carried out down the same wheelings in the field. So we only drive the equipment on the same places in the field every crop, every year. It's great news for soil structure, as well as reducing the use of the diesel that we're burning, and the efficacy of the operation, because we'll have less overlap and we'll have less wastage. So it's a great thing to do. However, when we bring in a contractor, as we often do, to help us with our harvest, we discover that his equipment isn't compatible with the other guy who's just been along. And then we find that we've got some potatoes or some sugar beet in our rotation, which requires a different set of equipment again. And we find that this wonderful idea that we're going to adopt, which will transform the whole of our business, falls down because of some very practical challenges. This year, for instance, we've had some extraordinary weather patterns in Europe, and we've had to dramatically alter our harvest programs, bringing forward harvest in one place because we've had very dry weather, and slowing up harvest in another area because we've had very wet weather. And that has meant that we've moved a lot of combine harvesters across Europe to places where they hadn't intended to be before. That has completely screwed up our approach to controlled traffic farming in one particular location. We'll recover it next year, but it's an interesting example of where well-laid plans and in theory a good technology perhaps doesn't deliver exactly what we've said it would.
Would it be unfair to characterize acceptance of technology as a major hurdle? Because a lot of these technologies are really quite exceptional, but what we've seen is that unless you have a discipline in accepting, adopting, valuing the outcomes, because our farmers are pragmatic by nature, right? We don't want to. The notion of adopting a new technology that hasn't been proven is a high risk.
Farmers are, as you say, farmers are incredibly conservative. We will do what we did last year and what we did before because that's what we're comfortable with. In fact, we'll do what we did a generation ago because that's what we're comfortable with. The biggest barrier to uptake of technology is culture, is a mindset. Somebody said it earlier today. It's about the barrier is our mindset. Even within a business like ours, which prides ourselves on being on innovation and committed to the use of good science and to innovation, it's really difficult. The biggest constraint on development of farming technologies in recent years has probably been the individual capacity of the boss, the farmer, the owner of the farm, who quite rightly wants to inspect all of his fields and make the decisions himself. A fantastic revolution that is offered by the technologies that are available to us today is that we can do that remotely. The vast majority of that can be done remotely, so that businesses like ours are now capable of being scaled up exponentially because we can remotely have access to the data that we need in order to not only make the decisions, but to make better decisions than ever could have been made by the farmer himself.
But you also have two dynamics going on. First of all, and we heard it from each, again, going back to the questions, farmers are very conservative because you can't screw up a crop. You can't screw up a season. There's so much invested in that harvest that I don't want to take chances. On the other hand, and we're going to turn to Pat in a minute, because what Pat does is really help farmers understand profitability, understand sort of what their drivers are, and hopefully then manage a lot better. But we're in such a competitive environment. We watch all the slides about population growing and inability to keep up, and the reality is, crops are doing pretty well, which means prices are down, which means farmers aren't making money. So ROI really is important, and ways to make more money. As conservative farmers are, they need to go after that, but they also, that bet is way too leveraged against them, so they can't take a lot of risk. They need to open out a bit before. So Pat, let's now turn to you a little bit and what you're doing, right? Farming is becoming more complex, constant pressure, efficiency, yield, growth, growing your business, growing the yield per acre, every direction, and it's all sort of chasing fewer and fewer dollars of profit, it seems, at least at the moment. How does what you're doing, farmers, manage that? But, tying it back to why we're all here, how does it help farmers think about which of these products can and will, and how does it help test them? And frankly, your company itself, right? They have this, the farmers have the same question with using your platform as they do with almost any new technology. Do I take the risk? Why do I take the risk? Can I afford it? What's it going to do for me? So how do you sell your product and then sort of bring that to what is it? When a farmer has your product, it helps them think about all this investment. Sorry for 30 questions.
No, that's good.
Now you can go on for the rest of it. Yeah.
Look, I think the digital divide of farmer adoption and acceptance is a real divide. And I think the notion of where value lies at a farm level depends on the type of farm. And I would argue that, Tom, the type of farm you're organized is a corporate operation. You are a command and control operation. You're dealing with a family farm where it could be family-oriented decision-making process. It could be as simple as, I don't want to use a tablet, and therefore technology doesn't get it. It could be emotional bias, even if you have a strong value prop. So what we have found is that at this early adoption of market acceptance, you have to diagnose the value. You actually have to sit with the farm and determine what value prop actually resonates. And for us, one of the most fundamental things that we see over and over again is not to get a higher yield. Because a high yield doesn't mean profits. It means spending more, perhaps, not necessarily making more. And so we've actually focused on the fundamentals. Do you have an infrastructure technology that you can just start to use to run the fundamentals of business? Profit by field, decision-making in real time, the ability to report to a commercial entity. And in that discussion, what we have found is that the escalation option begins, where people say, oh, finally I have a baseline that I can start to measure an agronomic decision. Do I bring in a new scouting technology that actually help me reduce my expenses? Well, now I know what I'm actually spending, and I can start to correlate these decisions. So for us, it has to start with a diagnostic. The minute we go to a farm, we can make you money or save you money, that farm says, get out of here. You don't know anything about my farm. How can you tell me that you're going to make or save me money? They are tired of promises made by a variety of technologies that don't deliver. So it has to start with common understanding. And once you have that, it takes a cycle or two to prove it. It takes time to prove it. And once you have proof, real legitimate proof, let our customers talk on behalf of us. Because the social effect of trust between farmers is 1,000 times more powerful than any advertisement we could create. And so that's That's where the real commercial success begins. And we haven't found a channel that actually can do this yet. So we sell directly to farmers.
But now you've sort of made a jump. You have the, farmers tell farmers, it's, you got to deal with the chicken and egg. Right? Where do you get those first farmers? Why do they adopt this? And how do you convince them to take the risk and effectively invest in your, whether it's cash or just usage? How do you get them to invest in your business?
So we were fortunate where we actually pivoted from enterprise sustainability into farming because farmers came to us and said, we need tools, access to capital. We're starting to grow our land mass. The nature of our working capital has exceeded our traditional relationships, and they want to know that we have controls and systems. And then it was things like traceability. We have an option to do non-GMO tracking and maybe get a premium, but we can't just do it with notepads. We need systems. They came to us. We didn't come to them. And I think that's a really interesting conversation, which I believe we heard a little bit earlier, which is you have to spend time really understanding the farm. And if you're trying to sell something to a farm that they don't value, I think that's a really difficult discussion. And so finding that sweet spot of measurable return quickly is, quite frankly, where I think the hard work is in a lot of these technologies, is finding that. And once you find it, I have found we have farmers that have invested. We have farmers that have contributed intellectual property. We have farmers that have contributed technology they built that they said, we don't want to be in the technology business. We need a partner we can trust.
Tom, let's go back to you and, how that resonates with you. Obviously, some of the things Pat's saying, seem obvious, but then it goes back to your decision, when you think about it. I mean, what if you could pick one technology today that, you would want to adopt or you'd want to have someone invent for you? Is there one? Is there a single thing that you could say, that would be changing for my business?
I exactly where you're coming from, Pat, and I think the technology that we are wrestling with, how to manage data. We're collecting data from so many sources. We've got such huge capacity to gather data. How do we manage that and interpret it in order to give us valuable feedback? You mentioned, however, that we're a corporate operation, which of course we are, but part of the reason we've been a successful corporate operation is that we have a culture of being extremely respectful of local decision-making. And we operate over a wide geography, and it's extremely important that the guys in Romania are respected as decision makers in Romania, and their decision process is possibly going to be slightly different to the people in northern Poland and the people in the United Kingdom. So it is dangerous to assume in a corporate world one size fits all. And indeed, my experience, and David on the board of Spearhead for years, and he'll reiterate this, I guess, is that our people are very cautious in adopting new technology, even though in the environment of a corporate that's very keen on innovation. So deployment getting these technologies rolled out is so difficult. You're absolutely right, it is about value, and the challenge that comes from the board regularly is where's the payback and who's going to pay us? Where do we actually get the payment from? Is it the customer who's going to pay us more for the product that we're selling or the service that we're selling, or does the come through a greater efficiency and a cost saving and an improved productivity in our process? But we've got to be able to demonstrate. And so you're absolutely right. The way to win the hearts and minds of the customer, the farm manager, the farm operator, is to demonstrate the value proposition.
Well, I think that's, again, just like going back to some of the things we heard before, corporate farmer, it doesn't necessarily mean good thing or bad thing, but frankly, it's part of the wave of the future. It's part of, technology being adopted because you will have more sophisticated operations in many respects. And remember, we heard the average age of the family farmer is aging. Why is that? Well, people are living longer. But second of all, kids don't really want to take over the farm. Correct. Whether it's Japan, whether it's the United States.
And our industry remains the most fragmented industry in the world. There are a few big corporate farmers like us. We're one of the largest operations in Europe, but Europe represent single digits in terms of European agriculture industry. 90+% of European agriculture is still incredibly fragmented, small
U.S.
farms.
again, the statistics may not be as high, but again, you actually go down to South America and you see some phenomenal, 400,000 hectare, 500,000 hectare businesses. You're not seeing that yet in the United States, Europe, very commonly, but I do think that the aging of the farmer, at the end of the day, we're not going to get away from that, and they can only hit a certain age.
Sure.
And then it's got to go either to a corporate or next generation. Again, a next generation that's typically much more tech savvy, much more comfortable with some of the adoption. So again, I think all those things will work in favor. David, I want to turn it to you. Tom keeps referring to you as that great backer who will agree with everything he's ever done or said. So you wonder why you sold the business.
He told me to.
Well, I said, I wonder why David did.
Oh, I see.
He agreed with everything you were doing. No, but very, very successful investment with it. You really have had a great run in agriculture. You were really ahead of the curve. You were on the board of Spearhead, I imagine. You could probably tell us about one or two other companies that were similar. Coming in as an investor and a director, you're not sort of on the line of operating, but you've got to watch what they're doing, and it affects, all these decisions affect you. How do you think about it when management either wants to adopt or doesn't want to adopt? How much of this do you encourage? How much do you worry about distraction? How do you push management to prioritize to do these things or not to do these things? Because again, as an investor, at the end of the day, you aren't you don't have forever. So some of these things may be great, but you're looking for things that are going to show return within your investment horizon and be accretive to the value of the business when you sell it. So how do you think about this stuff?
Well, that is very much the money question, because one of the things I think that investors in agriculture learned is that you cannot time the cycle in agriculture, right? So you can't say we're going to own this for 3 years and then sell it, because the way the curve works, you could be buying at the top and 3 years later be at the bottom of a cycle. So from an investor perspective, you focus on a much higher level, and you engage with the management about driving results. And there's a number of things that have to happen along the way, because the first thing is cultural adjustment. You come in as a financial investor to a farming business, you have certain languages that you just don't speak in common. Wall Street and the farm track don't talk the same. So you have to start building a number of bridges. And then, again, part of what comes into that is a discussion around financial metrics, which may be different. They weren't so much in Tom's case because his business was more mature when we invested in it. But in earlier stage businesses, effectively you're creating corporates out of small family businesses that you're aggregating. And as part of that, you get into all sorts of discussions that touch on basic accounting systems, financial controls, data management in the field, mechanization choices, borrowing of money and engagement with creditors. And every one of those constituencies either brings with it certain technology challenges or benefits from being able to show certain technological capability. And as an investor and as a board member, you're really focusing on is making sure that the entire suite of technology deployed across the business is best positioning the business to achieve the kind of results that as a board you're principally responsible for having management produce.
The good points, but when you're sitting in the boardroom, you're sitting on the board of Spearhead, what are you pushing them? How closely do you look at what they're thinking about, and how proactive do you get coming in and sort of saying, hey, I was at the AgriVest conference and I saw, your company. I don't want to influence any of the voting, but I saw this. This could be great. This could be game changing. How much resistance do you see? Again, conservative farmers, and ultimately they like to be their own boss. They like to find it. How much do you find that balance, and how proactive will you as an investor get? So when they're thinking about where they're trying to market, go to the farmer. If there's a guy like you sitting on the board, do they try to go to you? Are you going to be more likely to push for something to be tested out because you see that as a path to, a step change in the creation of value?
The answer, I think, is that there's no ready answer. I think managements, if a board member who's not a farmer says, you really should try this, they'll go, yeah, right. Okay. When did you learn how to farm? And so it's a fine line. On the other hand, as a board member, you have to be clued in to what's going on. And part of that is you have to be always, I think, alive to technology that you think might be beneficial to portfolio companies that you own. And then you have an obligation to try and bring them together. And maybe that's no more than making an introduction in a very casual way, saying, I think we have this issue. Talk to so-and-so because they may have a solution for it. And then you get out of the way if you're a board member, because farmers guard several things very jealously. One of them is the fact that they're incredibly confident in their ability to farm, because every farmer is always, believes they're a good farmer, and they buy farms thinking that they'll be better than the guy who owned it before. That's why they're paying more than the guy who owned it before. And then the second thing is they guard their data jealously. They don't like to share their results. So in putting people together or companies together, there's always a certain, call it reticence at the beginning. And for a board member who may deeply want to see changes made in a portfolio company, often the best way to achieve those is by a very gentle approach rather than anything that looks and sounds like coercion or compulsion. Would you agree with that, Tom?
Yes. Especially the first bit you said about
Right. So
being the wise director.
Right. So David is clearly a rare form of director, because having been one many times and having sat with many others, you don't see that many board members who make a suggestion. The CEO says, "Yeah, but that's not going to work for us," and they softly step to the side and let the CEO make the decision.
If the CEO turns out not to have been right, then the CEO has another forum within which that's going to be looked at. So
two questions have come up from the audience that I think are worth throwing out, because they're may or may not be exactly on point for this, but I think are really interesting subjects. One is we're talking a lot. Everything we're talking about sort of has the context of, sort of pre-harvest, harvest. What about post-harvest investment, right? There's, I think it's 40% of food is wasted from farm to plate.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, where value can be created, and frankly, where calories can be created to feed the population. That's, theoretically low-hanging fruit. How much, and Tom, I'll turn it to you because you're probably closest to this. How much post-harvest investment technology do you see, and how interesting is that? And is that the farmer's job, or is that, that becomes the distributors or the retailer's job?
It's a really good question. I think the farmer's job is to is to maximize the value of his crop. And it's about value, as Pat said, not necessarily yield. And value is about quality, and it's about, and when we measure yield in our business, we talk about saleable yield, and we talk about sold yield. So it's not the gross weight that you take off the field, it's the actual weight that you sell to the customer and get paid for in whatever form it is. And that's, to an extent, about the way the crop is managed, so that you prevent wastage. And we, with a lot of vegetables particularly, but also grains and oilseeds, we're doing a great deal of storage. And through the storage period, there is a natural wastage that takes place. So there's an awful lot of emphasis in our business placed on the technologies that we're using to manage storage and to minimize wastage. But equally, we're also very concerned at our marketing outlets and the processing that we're undertaking with the crops in order to maximize their saleability. So having a series of different outlets to enable us to maximize the value of the crop by perhaps creaming off a particular quality and size specification for one customer or one market sector, and then identifying another quality in another part of the crop to fit another purpose. That's really hugely important. Increasingly, I think it's things that it's that kind of thinking that is going to have to be deployed within farming businesses in order that the farmers can hold on to the margins that otherwise other people will make, and it'll just render the farm even less viable. And as you've mentioned right at the moment, we're experiencing incredibly tough market conditions in the agriculture industry. It's absolutely remarkable that this year we're probably into the 4th year consecutively of global stocks rising, and the consequence of that is that commodity prices are at an all-time low, whether you're producing milk or you're producing grains in particular. And so it's a real challenge, and the smart farmer will find a way of maximizing the value of his crop and adding value to it and trapping those margins. Otherwise, it'll be others that do it, and that will probably diminish the value of the farming operation.
Two more questions from the before we bring
Can I just add
Yes.
one thing on it, because this I think is important. When you look at technology and you look at sort of maximizing value post-harvest, many farmers can't store, don't have the means to store or process what they grow. So they become very dependent on next step processors, storers, aggregators, and so on. And those constituencies can set very, very interesting demands on farmers for either crop they're going to buy in or crop that they want to hold. For example, they may have a customer that wants certain characteristics in the potatoes that they buy, so they will be looking to farmers to deliver certain things to them. So the obligation to deploy technology, which can improve marketability or even create marketability, can come from more sources than just inside the company itself or the board of that company. It can actually be a market-driven kind of push, which I think actually becomes a much more powerful force as we go forward, because the closer you get to consumers and to actual finished food product, it is where the pressure is.
Well, I think that's really interesting. I think one of the things we're seeing in the industry, or that I think we're seeing, is what you're describing is changing because I actually think it's because of technology and because of information. So that power used to be in the trading houses, right? The ABCDs, post-farm, they owned it. They could buy low, sell high. They knew where the customers were, what they wanted, and how to get it there. And for the last 5 years or so, that's really started changing because Walmart and Costco and, talking to the farmers, they're telling them what they want. There's more independent storage today. There's more independent logistics. So I think you're right, but I think that power is moving much further downstream than it used to be. So it's not just the logistics. It's actually, just before it's that retailer.
But it comes back to what you can certify off the crop. What truck do you put it on? What bin do you put it in? What do you feed your cow? These are all, and the driver of that probably starts because at the end of the chain there's a Nestle or a Danone or a global food company that wants to be able to label its food in a particular way. And the sort of push up the rest of the chain will change the way technology is thought about.
Let me add to.
I was going to say, and the farmers who can respond to it are in a position to be competitive.
And they can make more for their crop. So you have a situation exactly the way Tom's described it. Its last 4 years have been miserable from a commodity price perspective. But adopting technology, even technology that you don't necessarily feel you want to adopt, but you have to adopt, it improves the number of markets you can sell into, may be your best defense against a perpetual price-taking position.
So the theme that's emerging here is one of a supply chain that's getting much, much shorter. The transparency from the genetics all the way through to the consumer is getting shorter, and there should be absolute transparency all the way through there. And we as farmers need to be playing our part in that. If we don't, we will be squashed and lost. Our biggest customer in terms of revenue in our business is PepsiCo, for whom we produce potatoes and they produce chips. The Lay's brand in the United States and in some places in Europe, and Walker's in the United Kingdom. And the mindset that we try to get our people to adopt in our business is that not that we're the grower, but that we are in the ingredients business. We want to make it our business to absolutely understand the very precise requirements that that customer needs of our product and their supply chain.
I'm going to cut us off because I do want to bring back Liron and Avi. But Pat, you look like you really want to say something. So while they're coming up, you can get it off your chest.
I think at the commodity side, corn and beans in the U.S., it's about efficiency. And as we get closer to the specialty crops and the ingredient companies, the farm side of the equation is about transparency and traceability.
Yeah.
And that's where the digital opportunity really...
And we haven't touched how the consolidation in this industry, which is probably talk about for a day, and I think is fascinating. But let's start. Avi, you went first before. We'll let you go first again. Sorry, I misled you. Okay, guys, you have Avi up here. You have his robotic harvester. Tom, I'm going to have you leading these two. You can be Mr. Wonderful, and tell them why you won't pay, but you'll license everything. But go ahead. What questions do you have? Why would you or wouldn't you sort of adopt this technology, and why would or wouldn't you invest, or what would it take?
I think I'm really excited by your business, and indeed, interestingly, I attended a presentation very recently in Europe of a similar technology which is focused on strawberries, so soft fruit. And in Europe, generally, we're seeing the provision of labor as a real constraint. So the move across our industry towards devices that free us from having to employ lots of people, and especially around the politics of the free movement of people, I don't need to say any more about that, is incredibly tough and challenging. And so the importance of robotics in that area is crucial. I was fascinated to hear you say that your technology is 10 times faster than the human, which was not the case with the strawberry business I was looking at. That's a bigger challenge, I suspect, for them. But so I guess my question is the speed with which you see you can deploy this technology and remove the labor, because we're all so traditional, these farmers. I think you were asked the question, what is the cost of the robot? Because my concern is that you create a fantastic solution, but that actually deploying it in getting businesses to purchase the robot and change their approach away from the large-scale labor position is a challenge.
Come to the microphone. Avi, come to the microphone.
Yeah, I guess that with the right funding, we will be able to start and sell system within 24 months. And as I said, within 12 months, we will start to sell services here in Israel and improve our system. As you know, robotic system is not a software that you can fix the bug on the way, and it will take, let's say, about 24 months after we will start to work.
Will you be selling a robot or a service? Are you going to own
We will start with a service, okay, because we understand that a farmer will not buy.
And how much? What is the cost of the robot?
About $250K.
Okay.
But we talk with the customer, and we know that it will be very hard to convince them to buy $250K
There's the
system
challenge.
at the beginning without the experience and so on. So we will start with service, and then they will see that it's working, and then we will be
What's
able
the return on that 250K for the farmer?
As
you know-
I said, it depends on how many types of fruit we will be able to pick. If we will start only with apple, it will take about 3 years. But if we will do it using, moving from apples to oranges, lemons, mandarin, etc., then the system will work 250 days a year instead of 90 days a year. And then the return of investment will be something like 1 year.
And why wouldn't you start with will you start with the 1-year return fruits? Will those be the first ones?
We will start with apples because the agriculture and the way that you design the orchard of the apples is much, it fits better to mechanically harvesting because it's almost in Europe at least, it's two-dimensional trees and not the old trees that you can think about. So we will start it with apples and then we will move on.
So Tom, what does Avi need to show you or offer you to get you to invest with him and help him, get involved in the development of his product? What do you need to have in it for you to do that?
Well, I think my concern is the payback on the huge investment. So it's about finding that model that says you can deploy the technology over as many days of the year as possible. I wonder whether you can move the robots to other geographies in the world and thus extend your season. So you're only harvesting apples, but you can move with the climate. So you'll harvest your apples in Israel and then you move north as the season progresses and you end up in southern England and then move back to Israel.
As you know, there's in some areas of agriculture today with a machine for harvesting cotton, etc., they are doing the same process. So it's a matter of operational.
Yeah.
As you say, you are the best in operation.
So Avi, do you have an offer? Do you have an offer for Tom?
We can write the
Yeah,
check.
exactly. We'll have a word after.
Liron, let's bring you back because we're pesticides.
That's a fallback.
I was really interested in your presentation, especially your emphasis on this crucially important issue, which is the efficacy of the treatment itself. So the fact that the farmer, you're enabling the farmer, the farm manager to understand that this treatment I've just applied has had an effect or has failed to have the effect I wanted. I love that idea. But I was interested that you didn't emphasize a point that Pat has made a little bit, which is the question of traceability and the whole ability of the technology that you're, I believe, offering us to have an impact much further down the supply chain, indeed to be valuable for manufacturers and indeed retailers and consumers. Could you comment on that?
Yep, definitely. So I think there are a few value propositions that we have here. The first one is kind of the initial data management. I think Pat also brought that up. Just, you can't fix what you can't measure, and we're not measuring that aspect first. The second is the reduction of pesticides, which is what you brought over, or the efficacy of the pesticide. Further down the line, it's definitely something that we're looking at. You have the examples of, for example, I think somebody mentioned it, Walmart forcing their suppliers to put in a fertilizer management program. Whole Foods basically saying, the hell with the normal organic system, we're going to put in our own grower rating system. And so putting in something like this, where at the end of the day, the consumer gets to Whole Foods or 7-Eleven now or wherever they're selling healthy stuff and having, hey, here's the apple that was grown with normal pesticide, once, twice spraying every week, to here's the apple that is going to cost you X times more, but we know that this had a minimal pesticide use, I think we know that about 75% of our fruits and vegetables today have some sort of pesticide residue. Whether that's bad or not, that's a side point, but there's still some sort of residue. In the States, I think it was estimated that it's going to be about $18 billion if you actually wanted to monitor pesticides and all the wells that are providing drinking water to folks. And overall, about $10 billion per year is the cost of collateral damage from pesticides, whether it's killing wildlife, whether it's health effects, whatever it may be. So there's a definite value proposition there. I think for us, the challenge is to then, everybody's talking about ROI. How do you measure that ROI? When it comes down to the Whole
That's why you have
Foods, how do they do
Pat
that?
here.
Well, yeah,
Yep.
well, can help, but I'm just curious, because you have two customer types, right? You have the farmer,
Right,
and then you have the service provider type.
exactly.
And so you have a multi-layered ROI proposition. Have you found one that's more responsive?
The first one is kind of the initial, the simplest one, is it connects to the data management / labor. We've all been talking about labor, and that's to the scout. That's to the agronomist that says, hey, I have even 5, 10, 20, 50 scouts in my system. I need to be able to manage what they're doing and understand what they're doing. That's kind of the initial, the first value proposition from day one. Further down the road, when it gets to the grower, for example, the grower that we're working with in California, he's got 4 private scouts. And when I went and talked to him, I went to him and he was my initial, I pitched to him first. And he said, Laurent, this is great. I have to talk with my scouts about it to see if they're on board. And I said, okay, that's fine. Do you think they're going to be on board? He looked at me and said, they will be. So essentially for him to get that value proposition of where's my money going towards and is it working, also value proposition, but that's kind of, the 1 season in, 2 seasons in, 5 seasons in perhaps, we can actually make that comparison. The initial one from day one is data management and labor.
Okay,